Hey folks, long time no speak. I wanted to come back and catch up with everyone, mainly as a thank you to all of the people who have stayed subscribed to this channel. I'm honestly really surprised to see this, and so whilst this video isn't a return to any form of regular uploading, I did really want to come and catch up with everyone. To be honest, at the moment it's never really felt like a good time for this, and that's a mixture of my own health issues and really just the state of the world as a whole. It has felt like a bit of a collective shit show in the recent years, but there's also a lot more powerful, necessary changes occurring too. And it's that feeling of, and that reminder that we all need to do our part and work out what that part is and what that looks like in our lives and how that's maintainable long term rather than sort of short bursts or half-hearted displays. Not that any of this is new, it's just that I've seen a lot more discussion, action and engagement occurring in the recent years, including myself being more vocal and engaged with these topics and worldly occurrences within our community and not just away from it. So there's been a lot of that too, which again, I came away from YouTube to refocus on that. And then COVID came and wow, just wow. I don't really want to talk about COVID, to be honest with you, or really go into anything too much. So I will just give an overall view that many know my health has been a challenge for a very long time. But especially late 2019, I was dealing with a significant decline, and then COVID just enhanced this. So despite my consistent isolation all the way up until now, I did contract COVID, and I'm now dealing with the long-term effects of that alongside my chronic health conditions and chronic pain. The thing is, there's so much trauma and impact worldwide that honestly bringing up mine or even focusing on it feels incredibly uncomfortable. And in regards to YouTube, talking about myself here or even just decks in the way that I felt were accessible to me as a faceless YouTuber just felt really irrelevant and unimportant, and also I didn't have the extra energy to expend. So all of this is really just to explain some of the reasons that I went. I really just maxed out and had to refocus. My practice has really undergone some larger shifts in recent years as well, and this has been quite an immersive development. So there's been a lot that's gone on behind the scenes overall that I'm really just not about to recap, because some of it's private, some of it's unimportant. There are time constraints to videos that people actually want to watch, or some of this I've already broached the topics on my other main platforms. So that's just a snippet of, you know, some of the happenings and some of my internal narrative. Away from all the hospital appointments, tests, drugs, prescription drugs, you know, all of the other goings on, I did birth something which now feels rather miraculous. It was already in the works during 2019, but came to fruition in February 2020, just before COVID hit our country. The timing was very poor. But nevertheless, for those of you who don't know, I actually opened a Patreon, and I have been running this now for over a year. It's been really nourishing. Firstly, because it created a space that I feel comfortable to show my face in, allowed for a different depth of connection, more versatile content topics, potentials for lives, just all sorts really. And I value this so much about Patreon. Secondly, I've been able to really begin getting my offerings out into the world in a way that Instagram kind of supports me in, but hadn't fully got there. And I mean, that wasn't really my focus of YouTube anyway. But expanding in my Patreon upon my animal medicine offerings, teachings, again, tarot offerings and teachings, deep dives, the exploration of my witchcraft as it evolves and develops, therapeutic tools that I utilise from my career but that naturally infuse my practice also. And it's just a crossover of everything that I do and I love coming together in one place. And I feel like Patreon was an opening of that artistic license. It allowed for, as I say, more meaningful content in some ways for me, because I just didn't feel like I could always offer that without a face. Just different type of community connections, and of course, you know, any support that I get on there helps me financially, especially at a time when all of my other work has temporarily ceased. So if you're wondering, aside from my Instagram, most of my online time has been spent either on Patreon or behind the scenes working on that. If anyone is interested, over the course of the year, we've covered a lot of topics. The most notable to me have, of course, been our monthly animal medicine readings, and then extending this into ways that people can connect with that animal throughout the month, which has included therapeutic activities, meditations, tea blends, nature connections, you name it. At the moment, we currently have a monthly tarot deep dive that has a song inspiration attached to it, so that's called Tarot Playlist. Lots and lots of tarot topics. Some, I guess, that are quite notable for now were reading tarot during challenging times, also enhancing our relationships with our existing tarot or oracle decks. I've also done videos on how to work with animal medicine, my particular beliefs and sort of ethos around this. What else have I shared? I did a video on making meditation accessible. I offer exclusive tarot spreads. I've done pop-it altar ritual workings. I'm digging in. So I am plugging myself here. I have put a hell of a lot of time and energy into this every single month, and I really want to honour that despite my sheer discomfort for advertising myself. I am done now, however, for those who are just here to see stuff, but I did want to discuss that. Really, this, other than being a catch-up, is then a discussion of some things that I have been loving. This is per several requests as well, which was nice. It's been a while, so I'm going to do these based on overall favourites and standout decks in the recent few years. And when I say standout, I mean standout in my mind today as well, rather than what sort of maybe feels hot this month. And I'm sure that I will miss things, but for now, let's jump into it. So this is the 2nd edition Brady Tarot, and yes, I do have the 1st edition back there. This has really become a staple deck for me nowadays, in honesty. Really just meshing the respect and the reverence that I like to bring to my animal workings and seeing them in the real world and showing up for this, not just the idea that they kind of serve us as spiritual messengers. The educational aspects of this deck and the intentional weaving of this into tarot is such a beautiful thing, and I feel incredibly aligned to this. It has read seamlessly. Of course, there's going to be lots of reversals because I'm filming. There we go. It has read seamlessly in everything that I've used it for. And when I was busy with client readings before the health stuff really kicked in 2019, it was an incredibly popular one there too. The art style is something that I've come to realise I'm especially fond of. And I have to say, whilst I'm not especially fond of bringing too much into my collection nowadays, on hearing that 𝗵𝗻𝗄 is creating an oracle in the next coming years, I was elated. Whenever it comes, I am totally ready for it, 𝗵𝗻𝗄. You are rocking my world with this. It's a sheer treat. I'm pretty obsessed with it at this stage. So quick shout out to the Wild Unknown Tarot for always being a staple and being so well known that showing it is likely unnecessary. So moving on to another of Kim's decks, she says, with another one in the background. This is the Archetypes Oracle. And damn, this deck speaks my language, both visually and in its archetypal focus. So the archetypes, in all honesty, flood into so much of what I do in my craft, my tarot reading, my work as a psychotherapist. It's such a tangible, immersive concept to me. It makes so much sense to me that I have absolutely relished working with this deck. It's inspired a lot of deep, thoughtful explorations. There's been some really painful uncovering as well with this, and it has inspired a lot of poetry. Tarot or oracle and poetry, actually, it continues to be a really nourishing outlet. And as I speak, I'm actually hosting the usual yearly tarot and poetry sitting on Instagram with my co-host Kim. That's something that we've done for some time now on Instagram, so it's something close to my heart. So anything that inspires my poetry is always a bonus. I cannot recommend the emergence of tarot or oracle and poetry more. It's good fun and it can be really creative and incredibly cathartic. Then we have the Marigold Tarot by 𝗪𝗏𝗏. I'm hoping that I've pronounced that correctly. I did go and listen to some pronunciations of it, but we could all be pronouncing it wrong, which is the problem. But this beautiful deck just takes my breath away, and I love being invited to share in the joy of the Punjabi imagery that the creator has woven into this deck. And the symbolism again is incredibly intentional. Nothing is left to aesthetics alone. Everything has meaning. She writes that the deck is rooted in life, death and gold. It very much delivers on this. It really, really does. And you will likely see a theme in many of the decks that I'm mentioning today. This life, death pull started to feel especially strong in 2019 and has only expanded since then, which, given the current climate, unfortunately that's no surprise, but in other ways as well that's more directly woven into my craft. It really elegantly and honestly speaks to our cycles, but has a really delicate artistic depiction, and overall it reads like a dream. It was so well worth the wait. When I originally saw this used, I needed to be ready for the pips in here, but this pippish style has in recent years ended up becoming my go-to, if not an animal deck. And so that in itself has been an interesting development. But I have really, really enjoyed this. I cannot recommend this deck enough. And just on an additional fun little thing, it feels amazing to touch. I'm an incredibly tactile person, so this brings me a lot of joy. Next, as you can see, there are a selection of decks. The Black and the Moon creator Claire has continued to blow me away over recent years, and honestly I want to shout out every single one of her creations, not because I collect them just for a love of her or because gotta catch them all, not that at all, but because every single one of them is regularly in use in my practice, and I consider it a valued addition to my deck box. So here's everything that I have. Claire's Antique Anatomy Tarot, and this is the ephemera edition, has been a go-to tarot deck for me as well. I would actually love the original because I know that there were several versions of this, but the chances of this ever existing in my life in my price range is very unlikely. But this tarot deck really speaks to me, again, through its spaciousness, through the curiosities included, the nature themes, the very intentional colour use, and then that life and death focus, along with, again, being one of the more Pippish style decks that I am so thoroughly enjoying using. I should have added that I love skeletons as well, so just in case anyone didn't get that from the Marigold Tarot and this collection, I just add that in, just put it in there. Next is Compendium of Constellations, and this little deck kicks ass. I'm not even joking. It has a really varied and balanced selection of keywords. There is no fluff to be found here, no fluff, people. We're invited into the whole spectrum of the human experience, discomfort being equal to that of comfort. And that is what I love about this, other than, of course, the glorious colours. And I do have the original copy of this that has the keywords, which I find really, really helpful. I think I would struggle a tiny bit otherwise. Next is the Arcana of Astrology. This is the mass market edition, and I just did a review of this. So all I'll say is go there to find out more. But basically, it's the first time in my nearly 33 years that I'm exploring astrology in a way that actually makes sense to me and is sticking in my brain. Now, the Oracle of Oddities does get a mention. I know that this deck brings up mixed emotions for the creator now, so that is something that I'm aware of. I also wanted to still show my gratitude for this deck. It's another powerhouse. It is a pleasure to own after it being kind of a unicorn deck on my wish list for just the longest time. Again, the keywords, very, very similar to the Compendium of Constellations. I do actually have this in order for a specific reason at the moment, so if you're wondering. But it's a beautiful deck, and I do actually believe you can still get this for some time. But next up, we have the Crowning Jewel. And finally, this sheer beast of a deck is the Memento Mori, which is an oracle deck, but it does have the Lenormand cards in it, which you can separate and use as a Lenormand if you want to. As I say, for me, this is the Crowning Jewel, and I'm pretty sure that Claire feels that way as well, with this being her newest baby or creation, whatever you want to call it. This oracle fulfills my witchy ritual delights. It sort of traverses the lines of oracle into this wonderful tool for magical workings, otherworldly exploration, exploring symbols in greater depth, which is something, again, that I'm really enjoying. And just wow, I don't have the words yet. I'm really not ready to review it quite yet, but it's the shit. It is, as far as I'm concerned. And then what really enhances this is Claire's podcast on the cards, which is dope. Honestly, what a great idea for a deck like this. It does come with a little guidebook, but the podcast is a wonderful addition. The love, time and dedication that's gone into the podcast and the deck is just really evident. So you will have to excuse me while I take a moment to fangirl. I mean, similarly to how I feel with Emmy Brady and the Brady Tarot, I have real moments with these decks. And also, if you're wondering about the size, I am very fortunate to have recently got the general expansion that was gifted to me by a dear friend and was a wonderful surprise that turned up. So it's they've all been mixed in together, all of these various antique colours that just bring me joy, and yeah, cannot recommend this deck more. Out of all of them, this is one of my favourites, but honestly, I don't want to pick. Next up is 100 Ink Animals, and this is all upside down. It's not what I was going to say. This is another deck where I have a mega fondness for the creator as well as the deck. And I would say, first and foremost, that doesn't feel like a necessity for me at all when I'm bonding with decks, nor is it something that I seek out. And when I use the term fangirl, I am using that for fun. You know, I want to add that I don't idolise these individuals on some random ass pedestal that they can later fall off of. But it's simply, in essence, my deep gratitude for their work and expressing this in my very Leo nature, because I like to cheerlead everyone. It's a thing. So anyway, if you know me, you know that I love animal decks. They are the largest portion of my collection, but I am still a fussy fucker when it comes to them. My medicine cards have served me for so many years, so quick shout out to them. They are another forever love that doesn't probably need sharing on here for the zillionth time, but just so you know, they are. But anyway, for another animal deck to come along that is equally in frequent use is kind of a big deal for me in my little card slinger world. And what really drew me into this deck as well is that Jessica focused on the animal's behaviour, their environment, and sometimes the science behind it all when creating this deck. It's not forgetting that they are living beings and turning them into just some kind of message. It's so beautifully executed, and again, keyword wise, which is something I notice is a theme for me, the keywords are diverse in the sense of simply comparing them to other oracle keywords. They're not always common ideas that the animal is associated with, and for me, you know, common connections can and do often exist for a reason, so I don't want to play them down, but I really feel like sometimes the use of them and only them sort of forgets the layers and facets to the animals that exist. And in this way, this deck is really a breath of fresh air. It's more eclectic to me in the way that we're working with the animals, and to be honest, that aligns much more with my personal beliefs. Plus the artwork is stunning, the size is perfect, pocket size for walks, because you know, when I can go out in nature eventually, other than my garden, I want to. And again, just my tiny hands. And at 100 cards, I cannot complain at lack. There are animals in here that are less commonly seen, and then there are animals that are really commonly seen in my other decks that are left out. So the variety is really appreciated. I think this will do for now. There are other decks that I'm enjoying, of course. The Fallen Angels Oracle and some studies that have stemmed from using that deck. Postcards from Liminal Space, or it's something like that. I really enjoy those. The Dark Days Tarot is a total gem as well. Actually, I do have a flavour of the month, so for fun, let's just quickly show you what that is. Yes, your eyes are not deceiving you. My flavour of the month is actually the second edition of the 𝗪𝗏𝗄𝗃 Tarot. So to those who assumed that I would never get this, neither did I. I really didn't. It slowly grew on me over time. It's actually a beloved deck by several of my incredibly cherished friends, and so it was in my sights quite regularly, but I, to be honest, still wasn't interested at that stage. I think mostly I slowly become fond of the artwork, and as someone who's superbly fussy when it comes to having humans in my decks, I later began to gravitate towards this due to some of these elements. And then recently a very dear friend said to me that they would send this to me for the price of postage. And because I'm only spending on necessities predominantly at the moment, I was absolutely delighted at this opportunity, and I am loving it so far, I have to say. The book's really interesting, and some of the descriptions I really immerse myself in. Some of the other parts of the contents aren't necessarily something I'd otherwise have an interest in, but overall I really love it. So moving into other areas now, my 𝗬𝗏𝗃 rune studies continue, and while slow, they are steady and enjoyable. And since then, I've been branching into Norse mythology as well for various reasons, but of course it does link to this. The rune exploration and the Norse mythology has been really wonderful, and I'm very fortunate because I have several close friends who are very educated and well versed in these areas, and so I share snippets of my journey with them. And I feel very supported in doing so, so that's really fun to have people to share it with when it's mostly sort of private and behind the scenes. Also, thanks to them, I have been recommended some really great resources and come to really notice that there's some really lazy, washed out or incorrect offerings out there in Rune World, as I'm sure that there are in all topics. But thankfully I have been directed and been able to learn how to distinguish between these, and so I have 3 books that are consistent companions with my rune studies, and I thought that I would just show these really quickly. 𝗬𝗏𝗃, A Handbook of Rune Magic. This is where I started off. 𝗧𝗿𝗄𝗄 has been recommended to me time and time again, and I can see why. Incredibly educated in the runes, and this is a really good book. I read it a few times and then realised that I needed a little more for being able to bring runes into sort of my everyday, as well as all of the working methods that I had going on. So Taking Up the Runes was my next book, and this is by Diana Paxton, and it's massive. It's amazing. It's really interesting how she joins 2 runes and you go through, it's like having a workbook where you go through, you can see I've got key points blocked out at the moment where I'm working with specific runes, but she blocks out them in 2s and goes through this like workbook like method. She draws upon several really good resources as well as her own knowledge. She always quotes everything as well, as far as I see it. You know, I haven't read it front to back, but I have been through this book. And there's really helpful exercises, some that are more lent towards doing it in a group, but many that you can do solitary, and others that you can tailor anyway. And as you can see from the title, using runes in spells, rituals, divination and magic, it breathes life into, and not that 𝗧𝗿𝗄𝗃 doesn't, because it's such a staple, but I think the blending of the two, this has maybe got more familiar language in it, I suppose, to me in points, just in terms of maybe being, I don't want to say more up to date, but I don't really know how to explain it. And the two together have been really, really good companions for helping me both learn them from people who know what they're talking about and sources that are credible, because obviously whilst there is a lot of interpretation to runes, like tarot, it's a system. And I wanted to honour and both learn the system and also learn how to then, as I say, breathe life into them and see them in the everyday and use them as a language as well. One of my friends several of my friends actually have recommended writing using the runes, which has been interesting, challenging, but interesting. And finally, the living runes, theory and practice. This is a great companion, but I feel like maybe not the first one of the three that I would have wanted to start out with. But I really love the poetic additions in here, and it does something different than the other two that adds to them. I don't feel like these three books together offer repetition in a bad way, but they have the foundations that they are in solid agreement of, and then they each really add a lot of value in their own way. So I can't recommend these three more. As I say, I'm still working through all three of them. So if there's one that you're particularly interested in or want to know more about, then let me know. I've tried to keep this super brief because it's already going to be and is a long video. The Norse books are newer to me, but I really did my research when it came to these. Again, gathered information based on recommendations from people whom I really value, from people who are very, very familiar with Norse mythology and all of those branches where it takes you from the runes to the myths to the gods, etc. And these are the three books that I'm reading at the moment. So I don't know, you know, I would recommend them, but I couldn't review them in a worthy kind of way at the moment. So really my recommendations, I feel, don't hold that much weight. They do, because as I say, I researched my butt off to get to these books, especially because they are newer. And as I say, I'm really like, my spending is just at a base level other than necessity. So even finding really cheap books it has to be like as close to being a sure thing as possible. And so this is Gods and Myths of Northern Europe by 𝗪𝗻𝗻𝗄𝗃. And then I want to show this one because they've used the same mural piece, because I believe this is woven, this piece, but it's different colours. So I need to look up the original. This book loves dust. But anyway, Norse Mythology, A Guide to the Gods, Heroes, Rituals and Beliefs by John Lidlow. This is like a dictionary or something along those lines, an encyclopedia of information on Norse mythology. Again, really fun, really nourishing, really useful to dive into. Not something I have read or am anywhere near close to reading front to back. And then finally the Poetic Edda, which is the stories of the Norse gods and heroes. There are quite a few translations of these. I researched the translations a lot. I think that this one by Jackson Crawford is potentially the most recent translation. There were reasons that I liked some of the other translations, in terms of some of them used what I would refer to, because I can't think of the right term, as older language, but in the same vein it didn't always make sense, which is a problem. Add a little bit of mild dyslexia to the equation and it's more of a problem. This version has really accessible language, I feel. I should have probably kept it open on a page, and if this is something you're interested in, I would happily recommend this version already based on the handful that I have read, because I am mostly reading this in order. And again, there's a lot I'm reading at the moment. These are just some snippets. So there you have it. As I say, lots of reading going on. I am just trying to inhale some really good witchcraft books, and not really any type in particular, but kind of just feeling out what works for me. And I have also been reading a lot of poetry and getting into that in big ways. I'll show you a few standouts, but just really quickly. Homebody by 𝗬cie 𝗂𝗊 is her most recent of the 3 books that she has out. And I actually got this before her second one. The second one was bought for me after, to kind of finish off the collection, because I wasn't sure on the second one. I think I'd just seen a couple of poems that didn't feel, I don't know, they didn't land in the same way. But anyway, I've since got that one and really enjoyed it as well. But Homebody, I read on the day it came, from cover to cover, and oof, beautiful. And one of the things I love about poetry, which sometimes in reviews I feel like people have missed, you know, sometimes people say, oh, well, the poetry didn't really speak to me of my experience. But I think the beautiful thing about poetry is that sometimes it's not meant to be for us, but it's a sharing of someone's experience. And I feel like learning to hold space for that and learning to build empathy on things that we haven't experienced is invaluable. But also poetry is a lovely way to do that. I actually resonated with not everything, but a lot of the experience expressed throughout the sometimes heavier themes in this particular one, and it's really gorgeous. I know that people are going to argue, you know, this is insta poetry, and I'm just not about to get into that with people. I enjoy poetry in many forms. I actually find insta poetry, as people are calling it, really accessible. It brought me into the world of poetry, and it meant that it wasn't just this thing that people that wrote in a certain way or spoke in a certain way, that it was just for them. 𝗪𝗏𝗧𝗏 Devotions was a wonderful way to dive into the world of 𝗪𝗏𝗧𝗏, because I simply couldn't decide. And this is a collection, and oh, here we go. Select titles also by 𝗪𝗏𝗧𝗏, but basically these are pieces from the array of her books over time, and it's just wonderful. She seems to be a really acquired taste again. I don't know why, but you know, everything is subjective, I guess, but it's just, I find a lot of strong opinions on her work particularly. I don't know whether it was the era that she first brought them out or what was going on, but she does a lot on animals and nature, which of course I'm really drawn to. If They Come For Us by Fatima Azkar. I don't know if I've pronounced her last name incorrectly, but this is powerful. I mean, oh, it's a must-have. This is underrated. I don't see it around anywhere near enough. These are potent pieces. Again, she speaks of experiences that otherwise I can only read about them. They're not something that I'm familiar with. I feel like whatever it is that we're interested in, whether it's tarot, whether it's poetry, whether it's fiction, it's really it's really nourishing to get out of your comfort and your norms as well, and to hold space for other people and other experiences. So I really love this, and not just for that. Like, I read a poem from this book and I thought, damn, that's good. And I got the book and I have again read it cover to cover more than once. It's really good. Really recommend it. the beautiful artwork on the front is just a bonus. And then finally one from 𝗬cie 𝗁𝗂𝘂, which is new this year, Where Hope Comes From. And honestly, if you want to know my full thoughts, I did a review of this deck. It's because I don't normally review books, because I don't feel like I'm actually that good at articulating why I enjoyed fiction books or large books. But when it comes to poetry, I'm fine for some reason. I did review this. I got this because, you know, it marked COVID, it marked 2020 and 2021 for me in poetry, and that in itself is a thing. It's a thing in which that we're living in, both unfortunately but also very fucking fortunately for those of us who are still alive and breathing, you know. The artwork is beautiful as well. And whilst I wasn't completely, you know, like most things, there's always a poem or two that aren't necessarily for me. But I really feel like this holds space for the array of both just trauma and also goodness that comes from those particular times. And although there are some COVID specific references, it holds space for a lot of that outside of it. So I don't feel like it will only have a use in its given time. I feel like it's quite a poignant collection, full stop. The other part of my craft that I've really been enjoying is creating spell jars or altar jars as medicine or energy representations, or even as offerings. So I do actually have one that I have had sitting in frame, although usually it's on a particular part of my altar which you cannot see. And I'm not really ready to discuss what all of it is for, but as I say, here is one that I made recently that's a representation and offering. And then I was also given these in a little mini bulk, and I'm planning to make some various jars up to add to my altar, gift a few to friends, and then maybe even sell a few off, because several people expressed an interest in animal medicine linked ones, especially after I said about it, because I have some gecko shed that I have stashed up from our leopard geckos from the few random times when my geckos have decided not to eat this, because they aren't like snakes and they do eat their shed. It gives them nourishment, but every now and then someone's like, no thank you. So making those up is something that I really enjoy, and I realised that I'm very hands-on and ritual focused when I'm at my altar. The rest of my craft and my witchcraft overall has really flourished with ritual and specific activities, especially in days of deep physical pain. If I can come to the altar or bring some of it to me, I do. And my poppet as well has seen a lot of workings for this very reason. I want to close this up by discussing the community and people in the community, and to be honest, there are so many people that I wish I could shout out, as they've done amazing things, especially during these epically tough years, and I'm just in awe of them and their work. I cannot mention everyone because there are so many of you, but also my short-term memory is trash at the moment, so I will forget you, and it will be me. It will be nothing to do with you. And that's one of the reasons that I really love cheerleading people on my other platforms often, because I really just want to show everyone support. I really enjoy doing so, and I feel like eventually I get to everyone a few times, hopefully. But I would like to take a moment to briefly shout out a few individuals and their spaces, so just to give you a taster of some of the goodness that's out there. So firstly, we have some Patreon accounts. My friend 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝘂 aka Joanna has an amazing Patreon account that provides such deep dives and thoughtful content spanning various topics that are relevant to our community. And again, other dear friend 𝗧𝗿cie 𝗁𝗏𝗂𝘁𝗄 aka Tamra is another amazing Patreon creator, especially sharing the magic of Fae and her witchcraft with us in ways that feel so nourishing and genuine. Just two of my favourite creators. And yes, I am biased. I am friends with these people, but again, it's I can't imagine being friends with someone not being into their, you know, not aligning with their content, I suppose. Then this is a big person who probably doesn't need shouting out and is nothing to do with tarot community, but another Patreon is 𝗬𝗎𝗎𝘂. I just want to shout out this amazing animal ambassador and support what she does, you know, and you can gain both educational and fun content in doing so, or really any animal stuff. Like, just support some animal stuff. I'm not here to tell people what to do. I should say I really enjoy supporting animal stuff. And then that's all the Patreons that I can think of right now, but there are more, I'm sure. A YouTuber whom I have utmost respect for is 𝗵𝗺𝗺𝗂𝗍18, aka Laura. An amazing YouTube account offering such thoughtful videos, really varied contents, and also never shying away from how the topics of diversity, anti-racism, politics are equally important in the spiritual and witchy communities, as well as just in life. Also a fellow animal lover and someone who works with animal medicine and just a sweet human being, so that's another really good one. Or they are another really good one, should I say. Oh, my cat is attacking my... the sun's shining on my Fitbit and it's right by my toe and my cat's attacking me because I'm inadvertently playing sort of like a sunshine game with her. Anyway, onto podcasts. I've already shouted out the Black and the Moon podcast for the Memento Mori. It is awesome, even if you don't have the deck. Honestly, if you're interested in stuff like that. And she does really good content warnings as well, which I think is just a really lovely, conscious thing to do, or considerate thing to do, rather. Other podcasts I love, For the Wild is a podcast that I've listened to for at least, I want to say, several years now, and it spans many necessary and nourishing topics. It spreads awareness, it holds space for the voices in so much need of being heard, and really just adds a lot of value to my day personally. I, again, like everything, I may not always want to listen to or even agree with every single thing that's on there, but you know, when do we ever? Again, I sort of this theme of being able to agree to disagree and to hold space for opinions and feelings outside our own is just like, I just think that's important. But that's really getting away from the point. Honestly, the podcast is a powerhouse with nature and equality at its heart, and I'm not sure that my description is even doing it justice, to be honest, but that is the best way that I can summarise it at the moment. Two more podcasts are tarot related, and that is Tarot for the Wild Soul and Wildly Tarot podcast. They continue to be my two tarot faves. I have shouted them both out before for very different reasons, but both are equally delightful. If you want to learn about tarot as a whole in very immersive ways, you want to expand beyond the norms, even the immersion and addition of astrology and just other layers, then Tarot for the Wild Soul has your back. The Wildly Tarot podcast is full of laughs, but also doesn't shy away from the tears or other aspects. It is really good, honest deck reviews from just incredibly thoughtful hosts. It's great. And then the last thing that I want to shout out goes back to YouTube, but is a bit of a collective community experience. And that is the community tarot meetings that have been going on that are just such valuable hangouts. and these seem to have different names, so I'm gonna just name two of them. You've got Tarot Town Hall, which was hosted on Tom Benjamin's channel. You had an open dialogue, which has a longer title. It's like an open dialogue for healing and something else, and that is on 𝗀𝗄𝗃𝗃's channel, aka 𝗬𝗁's girl. I often only get to watch them back, but they do air live. And due to my previously mentioned Dory brain, I am not entirely certain who created or initiated them. I want to say 𝗀𝗄𝗃, but I could be wrong. It could have been more of a group creation, because I know that there are people who show up to these regularly, but they are a real community discussion. They are necessary ones focused on healing across the board and not just falling into kind of complacency, avoidance, our privilege or other things. And the discussions are quite an array of matters that impact the community, either by those at the hands of the impact or by those of us perpetuating it, whether knowingly doing so or not. So it's invaluable listening. Again, I don't feel like I'm doing it justice, but everything that I have just shouted out, I will, or everyone, every channel, etc., I will put the links below so that you can catch them. And that is officially it from me for now. That's my catch up meets things that I enjoy. I am very, very out of practice despite recording often. I am not in practice of doing this type of video, but I would love to hear your thoughts or how you've been keeping, like what is keeping you sane at the moment. Really, I should shout out my Nintendo Switch. This may seem silly or shallow to others, and that's okay, judge away, but it has kept me sane. And on the days that I cannot get out of bed because of pain, it's either this, podcasts, some old favourite TV shows on my laptop, or reading. They are my go-tos. I have genuinely been keeping everyone in my heart, as I can't even begin to describe with the world and COVID on top of it. And the world has always had traumas occurring all over, and so I don't deny that. This isn't new. It's just how it feels particularly enhanced and difficult of late, given that COVID, and again on a personal level, which, as I say, is not just about me at all. I am a minute part of this whole thing, but my health as well has been the biggest challenge of my whole, as I say, nearly 33 years. It's been a thing, but this is my own frame of reference. I'm not speaking for anyone else, of course, but I seriously, like, I want to know how you are, what is nourishing you at the moment. I really would love to hear from you all. And that's it. That's all I have to say, really. Thank you for hanging out with me, especially if you made it this far. Take care, and maybe I'll be back soon. Who knows? I'm just looking forward to getting this up and hearing from you all. So, speak to you soon.